Okay, so this should be fairly simple. The first thing that we have to do is, well, you don't necessarily have to do this part, but I like to do this part when I'm working. I'll take one of the legs so that it doesn't get confused with the other one from the different orthographic views, like when I pop into my side view, for instance. And another thing that I'll do just real quick is just so you can see, I will hide the grid. I'll go to display at the very top down to grid to hide it in all my views just for the moment. And then it doesn't get too hectic on the side view to where it makes it feel like your eyes are going to bleed. So I'll come over here to the perspective view, pop back in there with my spacebar, and I'll just hit Control H, which is the same thing as going to display and using my hide feature. So I can hide, and the opposite of that to show is going to be Shift H to show something that is selected. So hide a selection, Control H to show a selection, Shift H. So come over here, hit Control H, hide the right leg, and I'll work with the left leg. Okay. In here, just so you guys can see, I will come back to display down to grid, and I will show my grid again. And this is a rather bit of a larger rig, probably more close to human scale. So the grid looks tiny because we're in centimeters in Maya's default, but that's not to worry. That's not going to mess anything up. Again, if you were to change the scale of anything, it will not mess anything up. So I'll go to create down to NURBS primitives, and we are dealing with circles. So I'll just tear this tab off real quick. Come up here to this perforated edge looking thing, drag this over here, and I will click on the circle to create three of them. And again, you'll notice I have interactive creation turned off. This will allow Maya to create my NURB circles when I click them, 1, 2, 3, for me, based off of a scale on the radius as Maya does the math and calculations for me. At that point, I no longer need this, so I could just close this, NURBS primitives, and I'll take this and rotate these the way that the tutorial tells you guys to do so. So you'll see that I have NURB circle 4 and so on. That's only because I tried this earlier and I have some NURB circles in here. So what I'll do is I'll take this and I'll leave the first one there. I'll go to the second one and I will take one of my rotations and I'll check it to see. So like rotate Z, for instance, if I select the text of it to where it's highlighted in blue, I will hold down my middle mouse button here in my work area and drag. You'll see that it changes that value, so I don't have to play a guessing game. And I see that I get a positive value of 68, so I'll just type in 90, and that makes it perpendicular. Okay, I'll take the last one here, and I'll do a rotate Y maybe. Nope. Hit Control Z to undo that. It's rotate X. So, okay. So rotate X, I could do a positive 90 or a negative 90. I have a value right there. And that's really just to get it like the gyroscope type of effect. So I'll hit F to frame this. And you'll see that now I have these as 1, 2, and 3, and they're all right there. Okay. The next part of the tutorial tells you guys to, I mean, we really could take these if we wanted, and let me go ahead and take this guy. This is what's called a reference node, and we deal with that a little bit later when we want to do like motion capture and whatnot. So I'm just going to take that reference node, and we use reference nodes to create characters. So I'll just take it and hide it because we don't need it at this moment. Hit Control H, and that bad boy is gone, so that's okay. I could drag a marquee around all of these, and I like to myself go up to Edit down to Delete by Type and delete the history. And I also like to, in this case, go to Modify down to Freeze Transformations. Okay, that'll put everything at 0, which we're not really worried about. So we have happy math up here. When it comes to rigging, guys, we are going to want happy math as much as we can. For joints, we're going to have translation data, but rotation data we generally want to be clean. And for controllers, we want translation data to be clean as well. Okay. For joints, we have no choice because Maya wants them to be somewhere in our space inside of here. Okay. So don't let that throw you off when you freeze your transformations on your joints. All right. Okay. So back to this bad boy. I'm going to take this and we have the nerve circles in here, and what we'll do is we could label this later, but for now let's follow that part where we put them all together. I'll go up to Window down to Hypergraph Connections, and the first thing that you're going to see is that this thing comes up, and we have the actual nerve circles right here. and we have their shape nodes. So you see below here we have shape 3, shape 2, shape 1. Um, those are the ones that we have. Together we'll take the shape nodes of 2 of them. So I'll do the reverse order. So the last one I created is NURB circle 6 in this case. So I'll take its shape node, shift select this shape node, and you're noticing that the shape nodes aren't corresponding with the actual circle number. So I have NURB circle 5, but I have shape node 2 and NURB circle 6 and shape node 3. Don't let that deter you. It is the shape node for the corresponding NURB circle above it. Okay. The last one here on the exercise says to shift select the NURB circle, in my case NURB circle 4, but this is just the original NURB circle. Okay. You might have 1, 2, and 3 for your NURB circles. That's okay. Don't worry about the numbers. They are just NURB circles and shape nodes. So once I have that, I can do the script, and it's just parenting. So we could hit Control P or edit parent in this case. If you guys ever forget the script, you can do the edit parent. It's pretty much the same thing. But I'll come down here and I'll hit parent space. I'll do a dash R dash shape. And then generally we'll put a semicolon right there. When you're running the mouse script in the line down there, I do believe that if you hit enter, it would still work as well. But in older versions of Maya and stuff, we used to have to hit enter on the numeric keypad on the right. So I'll just do that. I'll hit enter on the numeric keypad on the right. If you're rocking Apple, you can hit return. Okay, and it says that it's run it. So results, NURB circle shape, NURB circle shape 2. So shape 3 and shape 2 should be following this guy right here. We don't really see like a physicality inside of the hypergraph, so I will minimize this, and then I'll click off screen to deselect everything. And when I click on this, what happens here is that our shape nodes are now connected to the original NURB circle and its shape node, its transform node, if you will, which means that they're all acting as though they are one object, even though they are 3 different / separate objects. They are reading as one in here. Okay. So I will take the other 2, these little stragglers here, and you could do it in the hypergraph if you still have it open. These 2 shape nodes here, we would be able to delete, or if you would like to do it in here in the outliner, we could delete those there. So I'll just hit delete. It doesn't hurt anything because now they're really connected to the original NURB circle, that the first one that we created. It's connected to that. Okay. So we have that going on. Every time I select it, that's what it's going to be. So for these, you're going to label them to their corresponding joints. Okay, so whatever controller they're going to be, that's what you're going to label. So in this case, I can do like hips controller. And I didn't really read this part, but when you guys are rigging, you're going to come up with your own naming convention a lot of the times. Also, if you guys are working for a company, they're going to probably have you name these a certain way. It all depends on who you're working for, on how much control you have, and all that good stuff. Okay, so you'll notice that we do have our happy math here. And with this thing selected, the next step is to group it to itself. So the group is going to be the actual offset for the controller. And what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to duplicate this setup, and I'll just rename them as I see fit. So one for the knee, one for the ankle, and all that good stuff. But let's get with the hip controller here. And what I'll do is I'll go to edit down to group, which you'll see the hotkey is Control G or Command G. So I'll click on that. And what I've done is I've grouped this hips controller to itself. So this thing is really just grouped to itself, and that's so that the group node will maintain or preserve the attributes for the hips controller. So the attributes being the translations and scales and such, and rotations. Mainly for us, it's rotations. That's the most important part. But it maintains that and it preserves it. That way the group node will take the controller with it, and the group node will follow the joint without messing up any of the attributes for the actual hips controller. And that's where the magic happens on the example that we'll be doing here with the leg, or this whole setup in general. So I'll take this group node, and I'm not too sure what to call it, so I'll just kind of name it based after the hips controller. So I'll call it, let's see, hips offset because it is an offset. I'll call it hips offset group. And I like to put capital G RP, but you can spell out group completely if you like. I'll spell it out this time for you guys. So hips offset group, hit enter. And now we have this invisible group node that will take this whole setup that we have, the controllers, along with it. Okay. So I'll select my character reference because you see that for me, the whole character is following that character reference. I myself, and I would like to see you guys doing this from here on out, I would like you to use display layers. That way you can just, hide your skeleton, hide your geometry, and hide your controllers. Those are the minimum, okay? And then you also will generally put facial expressions via blend shapes. So you'd make another layer for your blend shapes and all that good stuff. But for now, let's focus on this tutorial, okay? I'm going to take this and I'll hit Shift H to display it again. And basically that just turns the visibility on. Same thing as going to display down to show selection. Okay. So that is back, and I will take this controller. So here's the group that I created, right? The offset group. And I will take that, and this is the thing that I would do everything to other than scale. So I would be able to scale this thing up to make it larger than the bones because we need this to be selectable, easily selectable for the animator. Okay, so let's do this. I will take this group node, and we need to have the group parented to this, and it's a parent constraint. So the selection order is going to be a little bit different from a regular parent. So edit, parent, we select the child first and shift select the parent. Okay. For constraint, we select the parent first and then shift select the child. So if I'm doing a parent constraint, for instance, I will select the parent, and let me just tear this off so you guys can see. And if you guys are ever looking at some tutorials and stuff like that and you kind of get lost about where I did click to tear one of these off, if you look at the top here, it says constrain, and it's kind of going off of this guy right here. The only ones that'll be different, if you see that motion path down there, if I were to tear off the motion path part, because it's a sub menu, it says motion paths, but motion paths is a part of the constraint menu set, if you see that. Okay, so it won't say constraints motion path. That's the only thing that can get kind of tricky. Okay, so for constraints, I will select the parent first, which is going to be this joint right here, the hip joint. And the bones, guys, right here, the bones are really going to select the hips. So if I were, let's say this way, the bones are going to select the joint that it is attached to, its parent joint, basically. So this one's pointing to a child. If I select this joint, it's the same thing as if I select this bone. This bone is really just a visual representation of this joint. So it makes things easier for us to connect inside of Maya via how our brains work, seeing the physical connection. Okay, otherwise we could have floating joints with a connection and it wouldn't hurt us at all. All right, it would work the exact same. But they put these nifty little bones in here so that we can see what is going on. Now, what I can do here is I select the bone or the joint. It's really going to select the joint. If you guys see that here, left up leg, that's my joint. And I'll come over here and I'll hit Control and I'll click on the group node, okay, of my controller. And then go up to Constrain down to Parent, option box on the right. And I did tear this off, so I could just go to the part where I tore off. Option box right here. Just turn off Maintain Offset. What that does is that Maintain Offset is a spatial relationship, okay? And what it'll do is it will keep a spatial relationship from where that little controller here at the bottom is up to the actual joint here. It will keep that spatial relationship so the controller would stay there and affect or be affected by the joint way up here with that same spatial relationship. If we turn Maintain Offset off, it's going to snap the translates, so it'll move this controller group right onto the joint, and it will change the rotates so that the group node will be rotated along with the leg joint. Okay. Speaking of rotation, I didn't check my rotation on this before I started this tutorial. So what I'll do real quick before I actually add this group node to this and parent constrain it is I'll close this and I'm going to use my selection tool. And you guys should be using this a lot in rigging because your selection tool is going to help you not to rotate or translate or scale anything accidentally, because you can still select things with these other tools, like your transform tool, and you can accidentally do that just a little bit and offset it a bit and not realize that you did it. Okay, so I'll undo that, and that's just an example of why we want to use our selection tool only. But I'll select this up leg and I'll hit either F8 on my keyboard, or I'll come up here to component mode. Okay, and I'll come over here to my miscellaneous components. And hopefully in the reading it talked about orienting your joints. Generally in classes, in my classes, I like to have these where X points to the child. Okay, so this X should be pointing down here. And I like to have the Z's pointing out on the left-hand side for vertical joint setups. Vertical being up and down, how the leg is, the Z would point outward. Horizontal, like the arm, the Z would point forward. So this is actually a good setup for the arm, with the exception of the fingers. I'd have to go in here and probably clean those up. They actually look pretty decent though, the way they're set up. Okay, but I'll select this one here. And for some reason, no, okay, that's okay. But with this, I can take this in object mode real quick, and I'll go to, I'm in rigging, so let me check the skeleton orient joint option box. I'll say X, Y, and Z will fall into place here. So let's hit orient and see what that does for us. And just real quick, if I show you that again, skeleton orient joint option box, the primary axis is basically saying what's going to point down to the child. So the x-axis will point down to the child. Secondary axis is going to be, and these are based off of rotation axes. We could talk about this another time a little bit more in depth, because you can change these based off of what the character is going to have to do rotation-wise. So the secondary axis is going to pay attention to the y-axis, and the z will be pointing outward in this case. Okay, so this is pretty nice. It'll follow the chain all the way down, so it's going to go based off of the children, orienting the children that are branched off of this root joint as well. So it oriented this joint and this joint and this joint and this joint. So every joint on the way down this way, all the children joints, it's oriented. Okay, so I'll go ahead and close this, and you'll see now that if I either hit F8 or I click on component mode again, with miscellaneous component turned on up here, this little question mark, I have the X's pointing down and my Y's are pointing to the right now. I could have told the Z's to point that way, and we could try it real quick. Let's go skeleton, orient joint option box. Let's see what it does with the Z if it doesn't totally break it. I'll hit apply, and I'll leave this open just in case. But let's see here. If I go to component mode, nope, didn't really care. So not too worried about this. I'll close it, and I'll deal with the orientation myself. Okay, so the X's are pointing down. All I have to do is select this little axis handle, and I'll hit E, which is my rotate tool over here. Okay, I'll hold down J, and I want the Z's to be pointing outward like this. Okay, same with this one. Hold down J and orient only the one axis until the Z is pointing that way, so that X is pointing to the child. So this is a parent joint, X is pointing to the child, Z points outward, and Y falls into place. Okay, this is going to be a proper orientation for us to work with. And you always want to orient your joints first. Don't ever forget that, because if you do, then you have to start breaking your chain and your setup, your constraints, all that good stuff. You have to get rid of all that to repair the joint setup that you have, because the orientations can throw it off enough to where nothing functions correctly. You get a lot of broken stuff, or the exorcist in your rig, if you will. Okay. On an end joint like this, I'll just point this to a fictitious joint that's out here somewhere, my pretend joint that's out here. So the X points to a pretend joint, and I'll hold down J, and I'll just get my Z axes to go where I need it to be, and then that's a proper orientation right there. Okay. So other things that'll be like this are going to be the spine. The Z's will be pointing the same direction. The X's will be pointing upward towards the children, because you see that the chain goes like if these bones were arrows pointing upwards. So X will be pointing to the child up that way. Z will be pointing this way to the left, and Y will fall into place. Okay. And the arm right here is a pretty good setup. So you guys can even take screenshots of this and see that the X's are pointing to the children. The Z's will be pointing forward. Okay. Now, depending on how some of the other setups are for you guys, because I didn't directly write your course, I'm just helping you along with this, is that when I would have you mirror these over, you guys are going to see that these are pretty much the same, how the Z's are pointing forward. When I have you guys mirror these things from one side to the other, so we focus on the left side, mirror it over to the right side, these would be the opposite, so they'd be flipped. And that's only because of the um, rotations that we get based off of this. So if I select the arms, for instance, and I go to rotate Y, a negative value gives me this, okay? And if we mirror it and let them pretty much flip from one side to the other, how the negative value lets my left arm come forward, like if the character was going to hug, the right arm would have that same negative value and come forward just like the left arm, okay? And it would make it for a little bit ease of animation. In my case, again, there's no wrong way to do this. Functionality is functionality. If it works correctly, then that's a lot of what we hope for, okay? But optimizing rigs and stuff is going to be very important. Now this thing's already getting really long. I apologize. I might have to make a quick and dirty version of this, but I do want you guys to get this stuff from the start. So let me get to the other part of this real quick. And once this orientation is here, let me save this first off. Save scene as, I'll just call it _01. Okay, that way I can have this version here. And I could probably share this file with you guys as well. But I'll take this. So I'll come over here to the hips offset group and I will scale it up a little bit. Okay. And I'll go ahead and freeze the transformations because I don't want that scale value to be that big. So modify down to freeze transformations. Okay. And that offset group is there. So I'll select this joint, hold down Control, click on the offset group, go up to constraint, down to parent. And remember, in the option box, we did turn off maintain offset. Okay. Oh, one other thing. If you don't want to create this again, you might want to take this, and I'll just click on it and duplicate it. Either Control D or Edit, duplicate. Okay. And you'll see that we have a group 1 node. That's okay. We could change the names later. But what I'm going to do is, again, I need to select the joint right here. Control click on the group node and parent constraint option box. I'll just add it. And what happens is that this thing snaps into place. So the pivot points are right on top of each other. The orientations are the same. And let me see here. My joint, I have no rotations. That's what I wanted because I forgot to have you guys freeze your joints. Modify freeze transformation. Okay. And that'll freeze your joints all the way down. Okay. Zero these out. And all I'm looking for is 0 on the rotations. My translations, I have to have values. My rotations, I don't. Okay, I don't want values on rotations. So what happens here is that my group node, going back to our lecture, is taking much longer than I wanted it to. I'll come back to the parent constraint node, and I can get rid of that now because all I wanted was the placement and for it to change my orientation of this controller object. Okay, so I'll take that group node and I'll hit delete. And now we have just this thing in place. And if I hit E, you're going to see E is going to be my rotation tool. I can use the plus and minus keys on my keyboard to make it larger or smaller. So I'll make it a little bit larger than the controller itself. And you'll see that my Z-axis is right here. And that means that if let me hit F8 for you so you can see what's going on. My Z-axis is pointing the same way that my joint is. So when I connect my orientations in the next step, it's going to connect them perfectly because all the Z-axes are pointing the same way and nothing will offset. Okay, you'll notice if you do it incorrectly because your leg's going to twist or this thing might twist a little bit. Generally, your leg will with this setup. Okay, so I'll come back up here to my options and change it back to object type or object mode, or I can hit F8, same thing. And I get to object mode, and that's pretty good. I'll hit Q on my keyboard, Q for my selection tool. Okay, and I will select this group node. I already got rid of that constraint node. So I could do the next step, and this next step is what you do with every single one of these. So I'll take this, and I could do a selection. I can select this first and shift select the joint, and my selection order will work this way. So I go to Window, down to General Editors, and I'll go over to the Connection Editor, okay? And because I selected them in a certain order, I selected the controller first. You'll see that my hips controller right down here is on the left-hand side, and my joint, which is called left up leg right here, character1 underscore left up leg, is on the right-hand side. Anything on the left-hand side is going to be what controls what is on the right-hand side. Or this is the driver, and this is the driven object, okay? The effector, the affected. We can keep going on for days, but basically whatever's on the left-hand side is going to control what's on the right-hand side, okay? So on the left-hand side, I am looking for rotation in general. So I'm going to come down here, and I find rotation. I'll just click on it, okay? On the right-hand side, I am going to connect it to rotation as well. So I go down this way, and I click on rotation, and now these two are directly linked, okay? How do I know? I'll come over here, deselect everything, click on the joint, and the joint now has this color coding. So pay attention to your color coding. Maya will tell you that you have connections, okay? If I hover over it, the newer versions of Maya, it says connected dash hips controller. So the hips controller is the one pretty much driving the rotations. The rotations of the hip controller are driving the rotations of this joint, okay? If I select the hip controller, nothing's happening here, but if I take my Z, my rotate Z, I'll just click on that. Come over here, hold down my middle mouse button and drag to the right and left. You'll see that it rotates the Z axes, which is pretty awesome, okay? Z axes, yeah. So that's pretty nice, and we have to do the same thing to the knee and such. So let me pause this real quick, and I'll come back and show you what we did there. Or actually, it's probably just a good thing. I'll just run over it again real quick. So I'll take this guy, and I'll duplicate it so I have another one for the ankle, okay? Oh, last step before I miss that. They're going to have you do this for each one of these, okay, on this tutorial. So I'll get my selection tool. And basically what you do is you take the group node, okay, and it has to be the group node, not the controller, but the group node for the controller. Shift select your joint. So I could shift select this bone right here, and it really selects that joint. And parent the group node to the joint, okay? Because right now, look, if I take this and I hit W for my move tool and I move my character, it leaves the controller around. Even though the controller is still connected, if I rotate this. See that? That's not desirable, right? So I will take the group node and I could select this guy right here, and I could do what's called pick walking. I hit the up arrow key on my keyboard. So I'll hit the up arrow key on my keyboard. That jumped from the controller, see? I'll do it again, select the controller, up arrow keyboard to my group node. Once it selects the group node, I am good. I can shift select my joint. I can either hit P on my keyboard or go to edit down to parent. And bam. I can now take this character, move it, and then this guy moves along with it because the group node takes this object, this controller with it. But the group node preserved the controller's attributes. So the controller, when I select the controller itself, is wide open for me to use. Okay? And that's the way that works. So I'll move it back to its position by hitting Control Z a few times. And I need to do the same thing to the knee. Okay? So I'll take this group down here at the bottom. I'll hit Control D to duplicate it, or edit duplicate. Bam. And I'll take this group node, and let's change the name real quick. I'll double click it. I'll call it knee offset group. Hit enter. I'll hit this little plus sign on the left, and I'll change the actual controller name to knee. And usually you're going to do this for each one. Like I didn't put left, I should have put left hip. So I'll put either LT or I'll type it out, left knee controller. which this one would be left knee offset group. Okay, and for the left leg, all the time you put left because we can mirror some things over, and we could tell it to change the name from left to right, which is a beautiful thing. Okay, I'll do the same thing here. I'll take the group node. So I need to select the parent first. So I want the group node to follow the knee. So the knee is going to be the parent. Let's select the parent. I'll hold down Control, and I'm going to come and click on the group node of the controller, the knee controller, and I'm going to go up to Constrain down to Parent. And remember, again, the options we had maintain offset set to off. So when I hit Add, it jumps the group node over and rotates the group node to be perfectly with and or along the rotation of the joint. Okay. The group node now comes here, which, I'm sorry, the constraint node comes down here under the group node. I can select it and hit delete. Okay. And now I do the same connection. So this time I'll do the connection without having these two selected. I'll go up to Window, down to Connection or General Editors, Connection Editor. And I have to load these separately. So I'll select the controller and I'll reload left. Okay. I'll select the joint and I'll reload right. And I will drag down this way and I'm going to find rotation. There's rotation there. And for the joints, I will find rotation as well. Right there. Always test your stuff. We have a connection here, but we could have loaded something wrong on one side or the other, okay? Test it first. I'll click out of here, deselect everything, select my controller, click on my rotate, and rotate Z works good. It's looking pretty good. Okay. I can close the connection editor since that's working. Now, what I have to do is this group object has to follow the knee joint, right? So I'll take the group object, shift select the knee, so the group object is a child, shift select its parent, which is the knee, because I am doing an edit parent right here, okay? And now that's parented to it. What do we do? Anytime we create anything like this, before we move on to the next step, we always test it, okay? So I will take this controller, and instead of moving the character, I could just do the controllers. So I'll select the controller, rotate Z, move it up as though this guy was going to kick or something, right? This controller went along with it, so that's good. Now let's test this controller. It's rotate Z down this way. And I could rotate it here too. It's not really a big deal. And that's all I do all the way down. So for this entire rig setup that you're doing, that's what you do, okay? And for this last part, all I did was hit Control Z till I got this back into its position. And then I would move on to this for this joint. So I would duplicate this first and then, add it to this joint, do the same setup. And then the next duplicate goes here. And you could put one for this if you like. And that's only if you're going to have this joint here control something. So if it was a robot or a mutant or something like that, that's something that we could set up. Otherwise, the rotation of this is going to rotate the latter half of your foot. Okay, so this is another setup that I'll save real quick. I'm going to say saving as. I'll call it O2, just because I'm not sure what to call it. And I'll hit enter. I'll hit continue. And this is 34 minutes, so that's awesome. So if you guys need, I could try to give you a quick and dirty version of this as well. But for the most part, I'll try to send this off to you as quick as possible. Let me know if you have any questions, okay? I hope this was helpful, guys. Bye.